You begin with an extreme long shot, and sort of like, I think there might be some allegorical weight or some symbolic weight to that shot. I mean, I absolutely love the design of that. I was wondering if you could detail if that was always going to be your
first shot.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so because what it does is there's also an element in there that says specifically says how the NATO forces were part of the thing, but was that your way of sort of like giving that extra info from the onset?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole beginning was supposed to be different, and you write the film when you write the script, but you write the film when you shoot, when you come on the set and then you realize, okay, I have 8 hours, because we shot during winter, I have 8 hours to shoot like 10 prepared shots, and then you realize I can do 3 shots, and then the style changes, then you said, okay, how can I do all of this stuff in 3 shots? And then you realize in the editing that what you've done. And I don't know, this shot became the first shot in the editing. There were 2 shots before it, and one shot was also extremely long and really good. I liked it, but it was the shot from a different time in the film, from the base.
Okay.
It was something that happens, and then the film starts. But it didn't work.
Okay.
And all of this beginning was supposed to be much longer drives. We also had a drone in these mountains. The way you see the first shot, we had a drone.
Yeah.
So I tried to do something with the drone, with like that you follow the truck, and then the truck leaves out to the map, but the drone goes through the cloud and returns, but we couldn't manage to do it. It was impossible to do it how I imagined it, and we spent the whole day trying to make it happen, and this is the most expensive day that went to
on the garbage.
In garbage can, yeah. So it became a shot in the with this length, and the shots that follow it are also the similar length. I have only 160 shots in the film, and the CGI, of course, this NATO. I know that I cannot overdo it, but
that's a very light graphic touch, I think, and it's very realistic. If you remember the war game coverage of CNN,
I remember the war. I mean, if you remember that, I remember I saw it with my own eyes.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing.
But of course you remember even the things that you experienced. You remember it through the images that you saw, or through the images that were shown to somebody else. Through the images that stays. Yeah. Like recorded.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, the CGI guys are from Belgrade, and they also were there during the bombing. One of them was in the army. So we were like, okay, they were trying to find more and more videos and then we chose, okay, this one is good, and then he tried to do it. And that shot was easy to do because it's static and it only has like panning. Yeah. But there's this shot in Belgrade when the kid walks through the Belgrade, and the biggest amount of this anti-aircraft rifle is seen, because this shot was shot in handheld, and it goes through the space. It goes left, right, up, down, and that was hell to do in the CGI. That took 2 months, only one shot. But it's also like 2-minute shot. So. But it is to set the date, set the like NATO bombing, to set the atmosphere, to set the rhythm of the film, the sounds. Yeah. And the way you will receive information, because this distribution information is really important. Of course. Yeah. And what you won't see, what you will see, and what you won't see. So I think that in the editing we realized, okay, in this shot, it has these elements that are then repeated or nurtured through the film. Good point.
I was wondering how accurate you were in terms of the trekking his voyage. Are all the locations that we see more or less on a pathway that brings them accurately brings us from point A to point B?
Yeah, but you have to realize that you have to know that we didn't shoot in Kosovo. So there's a political problem. There's a problem with these 2 entities or countries. Yeah. And Kosovo declared independence from Serbia in 2008, and Serbia doesn't recognize it. And it's still a big problem 20 years after the war. It's still not solved. So when I shot my documentary about the crime, about the case called DEP 2, there was only 3 of us in the car, and we could easily go into Kosovo and shoot the real locations. Yeah. But for the fiction film, it would be impossible, because we would need the whole day, 50 members of the crew, 12 trucks, and it would really be impossible.
Logistically,
logistically, politically, however you want to say, it's still a territory that's I mean, you can go there with your ID, but to shoot there it would be a big problem, and also it would be kind of you would need to make like a co-production with Kosovo, and that would be also a problem because my country doesn't recognize Kosovo, and I would have even more problems. So it was really touchy. But as I shot the real locations in depth too, and I used this documentary also as a way to location scout for the fiction film.
Mm-hmm.
I used some of them, and some of them I chose by the atmosphere, by the feel, by the nature, and also they are on the way from Kosovo to Belgrade. So we shot in this region of Serbia that they might have passed through.
Okay. Okay.
But as you know, the camera is almost always in the truck.
Yeah.
And I basically used as I told you, this information, what you get and what you don't get.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this background is chosen not only because it's real or might have been real for the real driver, but because it just suits the film well, and suits the form well, it suits the story well, that he's going from the mountains to the plains,
I imagine it's I really appreciated the moving camera aesthetic when he arrives to his when he's about to drive the truck, but also within the truck. I imagine the logistics must have been nightmarish in some situations, but
there are still several scenes that we shot as we planned to. For example, the scene with the cleaning of the truck, and that was different. And I mean, you can feel that it's different. That it was really prepared. There were several scenes that I knew from the start are really important and will be really difficult, so we had to prepare it in advance. But all the other stuff, I realized the second day of the shooting, okay, I cannot do what I planned. Let's try to do like 5 shots in one shot.
Okay.
And before the shooting, we had a list of rules what we won't do. So when they're in the car, camera is in the cabin. I'm not shooting him through the windshield. I'm not shooting him from a distance. I'm there with him. But whenever he steps out of the car, we are like a load on his back. Like we are on his back and we follow him. And it's because I focus the film more on the feelings than on the story. Maybe that's also why the camera work is in this way. Sometimes it's static, sometimes I needed to portray these feelings of occupation and isolation. So whenever he's inside, it's like you see the world and hear the world as he does. The war is in the background. Yeah. Everything is out of your sight, and you go through this trip with him. You connect with him more. Mm-hmm. You learn stuff as he learns stuff, and then the problems he has to face, you as an audience has to face. So my idea was to have more active audience. That's also why the way camera moves is really careful in what it reveals and what not. When you know, I'm not gonna tell now, but when you know what's in the truck, you realize that it is a story about the past, it is a story about the silence, and it is a story about ghosts. And I knew that I really like some horror films, I really like some mystery films, and I like really playing with these tropes of genre films, with this off space, and with this through that off space creating some, not only the atmosphere of creepiness, but also like I think trying to involve more of your senses and your imagination. Yeah. So that you write into the film your own fears or your own emotions. And whenever he's out of the truck, we are with him, and you can feel that everything is touched by war. Everything is touched by this kind of occupation of the mind. Not only by this. I knew that I didn't want to show the war. I didn't want to have action sequences, spectacle. I didn't want the film to be one thing, like a story or a ride in an amusement park. And it's also like, I mean, the way the camera moves is also like, okay, you come we shot for 30 days and the film takes place in one day. So we were shooting for a week, and then it was like really cloudy and fog everywhere, and then one day we shot a scene that's in the middle of these scenes, and the day is like this. And then you have to wait for the sun to go down and shoot the whole scene in half an hour. And then you prepare for the whole day, 10 shots that you had to do in one shot. And then you work. And in a way, the style is influenced by the occasion, by the weather, by some other. You just have to solve the problems. It's about the rhythm. It's about the rhythm of this man's drive. It's about this guy who cannot be a hero. I didn't want to portray his trip or his action as a hero's actions. And I knew that I wanted to portray this rhythm of repeating, of going through the
rhythms and emotions. Yeah.
And going to unknown landscape during the war, but not treat it as a war film in a way that it's. I think that even these small things that happen on the way are important.
Yeah.
These small characters, like in the films, you have these sideway characters that are not important. I wanted to show them, to follow them,
Yeah.
To portray the whole. I don't know,
sentiment.
Country in that moment, and sentiment in the moment, this feeling of not being able to move, not being able to run away, not being able to act.
Many different variations of youth that are aimless, some that are destructive, some that you get a sense that they're survivalists. They're moving, their physical compass, they're moving out of zones. And you also have his everybody in his son's entourage, including his son, and they're perhaps maybe tempered anarchists in a way. And I was thinking a lot about how these characters, the film takes place in the late 90s during that conflict. I was thinking of those characters today, and how The Load, they're carrying their fathers and grandfathers' incapacity to really acknowledge what happened.
Sure. That's it.
But how did you think about all these teenager characters? Are these?
This is something that I did. I was 14 at the time.
Yeah.
And as much as I remember the bombing, I remember falling in love with the music. I remember trying to have my own ways of. Now when I look at it, it's like maybe a shallow or teenage kind of rebellion.
Yeah.
But it's still a rebellion. It's still trying to act, trying to do something. And the film started as a story based on this crime that happened during that time. But I stick to it for 7 years. I was trying to make it 7 years. And when you try to make something for 7 years, you realize it's not only a story. And I realized that I have to make it into something more personal. I have to put more of me inside of it. So I realized that this story that I want to make a film on is based on something that was hidden from me, hidden from the society. It was prohibited, this story about the crime, about this character. It was prohibited from the society. The pictures didn't exist until the government changed and the proofs of the crime started to get on the surface. But then I thought, okay, this film should be this, but it should also come through the clash with my own experiences, the images I do remember, and these are these anti-aircraft missiles and the feelings I remember. And I realized that it should be a film about what one generation leaves to another.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the untold stories, not only the ruins of the war, the connections, but this inability to break the silence, inability to take responsibility. And that's why I also included, during working on the film, I included all of these kids, just to highlight maybe this intergenerational transmission thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the way the things became something that are behaving in an order that you feel that they have their own world, they have their own secrets, they have their own actions that are basically really reactions to the world around them that they were put into. It was reactions. They steal, they burn, they show this.
Yeah.
And you can feel that their actions are always aimed at the future. I'm leaving to Germany, I'm going to make a band. And,
Good point.
And all of these other people, the generation who is responsible for the war, they're just there in the moment, unable to move, unable to act. And then you have this Yugoslavia, the grandfather with the lighter, with the monuments, as a society that used to be, as a civilization that was used to be. With this monument, when you see it, for me, I knew that it was like a Planet of the Apes moment. Okay, what is this? It's like from another civilization, another time. And that became also really important for my main character because it opens him up. It puts him, he realizes the context of his own situation, that he's a part of a crime that's fascistic in nature and he comes from a family that died in anti-fascist struggle. So that's the tragedy and that's his load. And in all of these things, and the hitchhiker and the Yugoslavia remnants is something that opens him up for the ending story about the tree. And when I knew that I will have this ending story about the tree, I knew that the film has to be shaped as a tree. So you have one line. He's driving from point A to point B. but then you have these branches that are never finished, and that basically shows you the people, show you the society, show you this moment of time, but also it serves to highlight the intergenerational transmission thing, and it also serves for me that the film as a whole is shaped in something that I try to do, and that's something that's not visible, that was not visible to me, but became visible by time. This is the story about the crime. This is the story about, when you put things in context. And this is the story of the tree, of the brother who was killed, put into the ground, and then after 10 years the tree has grown. So maybe this film is kind of that seed for my people, that, for the people in my country, that maybe it won't work now, but if you think about it, if you agree to this kind of communicating with the film, maybe it will be a seed that will grow. So I'm now going into a metaphysical thing, but I really like these things are really important to me, to have this, not only themes and stuff, but the idea of the film with the form and the shape of the film. For me, I think I spent a lot of time thinking how to make that happen.
The pairing of your doc and this film, like, what are your hopes for that conversation?
It's strange. I mean, me as a filmmaker, I chose to communicate in this way. All of my life, I think that's the world changed. When I started making this film 7 years ago, the world today is a different place. And I think that the system in which I live almost all of my life, since the end of the 80s, where when it began in my country, this populism, this fake news and everything, we were the avant-garde of what's happening in the world today. And it's clearer where it leads. For me, it's clear that it leads like this populism and nationalism and fascism. It always leads to the unnamed mass graves. And my film, I know that my film is happening at the end of it. That's the end. But as I told you, like, I could have chose to become a politician. I could have chosen to become something else, to be like, to speak with people openly in the TV debates or whatever on the internet. But I hate this kind of communication because I'm drowning in it my whole life, in these opinions and these daily political stupid brawls, let's say. And then you choose, okay, I will make a film that will last 90 minutes and I will spend 7 years or however it takes me, but it took me 7 years to say something in these 90 minutes. And then when it was published, that the film exists and it will be in Cannes, the attacks started. But it was basically the attacks from the people who didn't see the film, and they were attacking the film as something only because they think that it was about this subject, about this crime in a certain way. And for the last 6 months we had this trying to shut us down again. It's like shut us down. It's about shutting down it. And for me this film is about giving the voice to. What do you give voice to? And in this way, whoever wants to communicate with this voice in a way that I intended, it's like coming and seeing the film and then we talk.
Yeah.
I'm open, and of course some people won't like it and some people will, but it's out of my hands now. I made an ammunition.
Yeah.
And the weapons are in the hands of those guys who have televisions, those guys who have cinemas. Usually the ammunition is in the hands of our enemies. But we had the premiere 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago in Belgrade, and it was wonderful. I mean, and we will see how it will go. But I think the film was destroyed before it had the chance to be seen. In a way, it was reduced to one thing. It was reduced to the crime and war thing. And everybody thinks that it's a war film. It's a film about crime that's pretty black and white, that it's like traitorish or anti-Serbian or whatever they're calling me, without even giving it a chance and seeing it and learning the things on their own. And there are more and more people who are accepting to believe the lies, because that way I think they keep this passive position. And as I told you, I think it's a problem everywhere now, that you have
unfortunately
people it's one big banalization of life, let's say, that people don't want to experience, learn and think for themselves and then make a decision.
Yeah.
They're making their own opinions and decisions by the people who are lying to them, and that's hell.
Yeah.
And it leads to the eliminations of the other, whomever this other might be in certain region.
And
also connected to this, I also if you saw my documentary, it's it's different. I mean, it's really about the crime. It's you hear the witnesses, and I knew that in this film I want to take as much information and context as possible in order to open it for you, so the people in Marrakech can recognize some silence in their own community, in America also, in USA also, and I think that's why the film really worked, in a way.
Yeah.
And of course, that in my country everybody knows what it is from the beginning, what's in the truck. So the big spoiler was everywhere. And,
actually, one technical thing is, so when he does reach his final destination, I'll call it.
The base.
He goes in the base, and there's one sequence where he sort of like sees a person that sort of like mirrors himself in a way. I thought that was a really peculiar comment.
That person is like the statue of Tito, of the leader of socialist Yugoslavia for 40 years, who was also a partisan leader, a fighter.
Okay.
And Yugoslavia was the second Yugoslavia, the socialist Yugoslavia was born out of this anti-fascist struggle, and also a communist revolution, and also a civil war. So we didn't have only Second World War.
Okay.
And the Yugoslav partisans were the only international army that were, and they won. So they won against the fascists and won against national collaborators in each of the states and nations. So he is the guy who created this country. He is the guy who was leading the country until his death.
Yeah.
And then the idea was that he is now into some ditch, some like room filled with old stuff. And the portrait you see, it's also him.
Yeah.
And when he enters the base, you can see the portrait of Slobodan Milošević.
Somebody else,
who is the leader of Serbia in the 90s, or Yugoslavia in the 90s. So it was also a comment about this time, and also a comment about the past and the present. And we put it so that he mirrors himself, because, as I told you, it's opening him up to remember his childhood, to remember his father, to remember that he's betraying them by being a part of this. And
it's good.
And you don't need to. I mean, now when I tell you, it's information. I could have put these information into the film, but I think it's more interesting that if you feel that it's something to do with this past thing, one is taking over the other.
Yeah.
Then it's fine. I mean.
Yeah, you get a sense of the way the painting is placed and how it's left to pick up dust. You get a sense of like, I didn't know who that was. It's not a nuance. It's just like I'm not politically entwined with that country's history, but you get a sense of that. But it's very specific, and that's why I was.
That's also like. I always have a problem, I feel that when you're coming from a smaller or not that well-known culture or a region, that there's a need in the filmmakers from my countries and to explain more things to the foreigners. And in that way, a lot of films are banal, even though you understand more, But I didn't want to have a film that's a historical lesson. And I didn't want to make something that is it's known. I know who this guy is, and my character knows. We all know, and that's important. And when you watch, films coming from the USA, for example, about Vietnam War, you're expected to know everything. You're expected to know why the war happened, when is the time of the war, the years, who fought where, the names of the cities. It's already a part of a general knowledge, and I'm expected to know it when I watch the film. So I want to treat my film like that, it's a general knowledge to me,
Yeah.
But if my film entices you, if you like it,
Yeah,
maybe you will spend some time and read something about the history and read something. I don't want to be the one.
Which is what I did after seeing the film.
Of course.
Yeah.
And if I would try to explain it to you, then it would be a film about explaining. And if I would try to explain why the crimes happen, it would be a film about explaining something that's, for me, a disgrace, like for the victims. It's not fair. And for me, the whole of the film is like, as I told you, for me the filmmaking is solving the problems. And the first problem I had: how do you represent a crime on this scale on film? How do you represent it? How do you can show the bodies, but do you feel? Did you feel more when you see the corpses, when you see the dummies? Did you feel more? No. I mean, so this kind of solving the problems, it's also the solving of problems of the context, of the informations you give, the history informations you give. And then you realize, okay, let's give only what the guy knows. You know, what my character knows, he knows. He's not going to speak about. He's not going to say what he's doing. He's not going to say what he's feeling. It makes more complicated, but I think that it opens a bigger space for the active
of course, audience member,
more active audience members.
Yeah,
where you will include your own imagination, your own, I don't know, curiosity in the end. I mean, it's if I don't move you and if I don't interest your curiosity, then or imagination or feelings, then I didn't do anything.
Well, those mechanisms are definitely in place. You do become enthralled on some level and invested. Anyway, congratulations. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.